Audio check. Audio check. Alrighty, if y'all can hear me. Thank you for tuning in to Back Perch Weather. We are live again here this morning. Well, it's morning here in South Texas, not over here in Vietnam, where we've just seen, so landfall has already occurred. We just saw the landfall of Category 3 Typhoon Kalmaegi directly over the city of Quy Nhon in central Vietnam as one of the strongest typhoons to hit this region of Vietnam, central Vietnam. If I zoom out here, you can see where that is in relation to the rest of the country. One of the strongest typhoons to make landfall in this part of Vietnam in a long time, in 30 years. We have not seen one down here in this south central region of the country since Typhoon Zack in 1995. And unfortunately, landfall occurred directly over the city of Quy Nhon, which has a population of 580,000 people. So very likely some sweeping, widespread, and relatively violent power outages happening there in that city, as well as potential storm surge inundation along the coast, and of course the inland rainfall flooding threat, which is always present with storms like these, and tragically present in Kalmaegi's case already. So this has already been a devastating typhoon, not for Vietnam, but for the southern Philippines, where Kalmaegi made his first landfall. Actually made 6 landfalls total across the Philippine archipelago, but it was the landfall over Cebu Island in the Philippines that has proved to be absolutely devastating, with over 140 people being reported as dead there after the Mananga River on Cebu Island burst its banks, overflowed, and tore through mostly Cebu City. Obviously, some fatalities have occurred in and around the city, but mostly in Cebu City, where the Mananga River burst its banks and just tore through the core of the city and wiped out all the homes along the riverbanks. It's a really terrible situation, and actually, you were looking at the deadliest storm of 2025 that we've seen globally. And I feel like it's kind of gone underreported a bit. I think it's slipped under the news somewhat because Kalmaegi was not a strong storm, not even as strong as what he is here hitting Vietnam. He's not a strong storm when he made landfall in Vietnam. He was only in the Philippines. He was only a Category 2 system, but it was the rainfall over the mountains of Cebu Island, and we're going to discuss that later. I'm going to go in depth on what exactly happened there because it's an all-out disaster. But it was the rainfall over the mountains of Cebu Island. We always talk about how mountains can make rainfall so much more dangerous, especially when it relates to tropical cyclones. It was the mountains there that channeled all of that extreme rainfall into the Mananga River, which then violently burst its banks and swept dozens, if not hundreds, of homes into definitely hundreds, not dozens, hundreds of homes into the river as it overflowed. But that was earlier. Here is now. So Kalmaegi, after going through the Philippines over here, then re-strengthened over the South China Sea, peaking as a Category 4. He did reach Category 4 strength with winds of 130 miles per hour. So he did peak as a Cat 4 over open water, and then he kind of got into an area of lower oceanic heat content. So the strengthening stopped, fortunately, here for central Vietnam. Weakened just a little bit, but not too much. Now, this last update here, 125 miles per hour, I think Kalmaegi was probably a little bit weaker than that at landfall, so we're going to have to wait to get the next update, which is relatively soon, from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, what they think was the official landfall intensity. But it's going to be pretty close to 125, I think. 120, 115, going to be a Category 3. And as I said at the beginning, this is a pretty close to historic landfall for central Vietnam, right? So if you look down here, so this actually is encompassing the entire coast of Vietnam. A storm not included here is Typhoon Yagi from last year. She, of course, made landfall as a high-end Category 3, low-end Category 4 up here in northern Vietnam, one of the strongest ever to hit the country, and, of course, the strongest ever to hit northern Vietnam, Yagi, last year. That's not included in this database yet, so in this data set, so that's why you're not seeing Yagi's track here across Hainan in northern Vietnam, so you have to take that into account. But in terms of, but that's like up there, so we're focusing down here in basically the central Vietnam region. This is kind of considered South Vietnam. And as you can see, there are just not many, so this database goes back as far as records begin. And there are just not a lot of storms that have come in here at major hurricane equivalent intensity, Category 3 plus, that have made landfall really south of Da Nang. You can say south of Da Nang is where we're kind of delineating this location. Back in 2001, Typhoon Ling came close to making landfall at Category 3 intensity, went just into Category 2 territory at landfall. So technically I have to go a little bit further back to Typhoon Zack in 1995. Kind of a similar storm where he went across, almost identical in fact. Zack here went across the Philippines as a Category 1, Category 2. Kalmaegi basically did the same. Across Cebu Island, Cebu City, which is here. This is where the disaster for Kalmaegi has occurred a couple days ago. And then he crossed into the South China Sea, re-intensified, had a Category 4 peak intensity over open water, and then because of that persistently lower oceanic heat content, that's kind of just historically always the case, just offshore of Vietnam, came down a little bit in intensity to Category 3, and then made landfall. Zack made landfall just north of Queen Yan, and then Kalmaegi, of course, making landfall directly over the city. But that is the case here today, guys. It's been a really long time. I guess you can say Ling was pretty much a Cat 3 at landfall, very, very close. Negligible difference. But still, that's 24 years. So 24 or 30 years is the last time we've seen something like this. What you're seeing on this satellite loop right here, a storm of this strength make landfall south of the city of Da Nang up here, which is significant. Typhoons do not get this far south very often. Getting to some of our early comments here, Geometry Bloxia commenting, hi chat. What's up, Geometry? Mitcha Boy says, watching from the Philippines. Cool, cool. Geometry Bloxia watching from Missouri. And Geometry Bloxia also commenting, he has relatives in North Vietnam. So the good news for North Vietnam is, as you can see, they are clear of this storm of Kalmaegi today. No impacts really expected in North Vietnam because Kalmaegi is way down here and not a particularly large storm, and not even a lot of rain bands coming in a great distance away. So Kalmaegi is compact. He's doing his thing in central Vietnam, and you are seeing some outer rain bands in Da Nang, a little bit north of that, but not really anything further north of that. So North Vietnam is okay, not experiencing any impacts here today. Mitch Boy says loud and clear, can hear me, cool. Geometry Blocks is saying catastrophic. Cool, cool. So that's the landfall we saw an hour and a half to 2 hours ago directly over the city if I really zoom in here. So the eye is not super visible on satellite imagery. Here on visible, you can kind of see in the sunset the higher cloud tops of the core. But yeah, so you're not seeing a very well-defined eye, but still a pretty powerful storm nevertheless. Again, that eye never fully cleared out, even at peak intensity. It's kind of has not been the most impressive thing you've ever seen, but it was kind of like an intensification process that was halted in the middle. So the eye never fully cleared out, but still a very powerful storm, and microwave imagery revealed a very strong eye wall underneath the core convection of the storm. Geometry Bloxia commenting, oh, what a relief. I was so worried, not gonna lie, talking about his relatives in North Vietnam. Yeah, North Vietnam, way up here, as you can see, clear. I mean, if that's truly North Vietnam up here. You see, but pretty good margin that there are not even outer rain bands from Kalmaegi affecting this region. So clear skies right now as they go into sunset here. So Vietnam's going to sunset. We here in South Texas are going into sunrise. So it's morning here, evening over there. As you can see, just now dark. That's not good in terms of the impacts, of course. We never like it when there is a typhoon impact and it's occurring as you go into nighttime, because that just exacerbates everything, makes the danger all that more present. And most concerned, of course, is about the the flash flood risk and the inland flooding from the heavy rainfall, because Vietnam is still reeling from non-tropical related flash floods that have claimed 37 fatalities over the last 2 weeks or so. So Vietnam has already been dealing with really bad flooding that was not related to a tropical system, and now they're getting this. And in general, Vietnam has also been experiencing a lot of typhoon landfalls lately, more so than their historical average. So you're seeing a lot of storms kind of form in areas that they don't usually hear down south. Obviously, last year we had the strongest storm in Vietnam's history, which was Typhoon Yagi. Now, Typhoon Yagi did make landfall in North Vietnam, so if we were looking at a Yagi 2.0 situation, which we're not, then yeah, anyone in North Vietnam would have to worry, not just from the winds, but again, mostly from the inland flooding. That's what the most damage Yagi did, right, was all inland flooding there in the mountainous terrain inland in Vietnam, but then also particularly in Laos and Myanmar later when the system was just remnants. That was Yagi last year. This is Kalmaegi this year, way further south, and not a situation, again, that we're used to covering. It hasn't happened in a long, long time. 24 to 30 years is, give or take, whichever one you want. But as you can see now, I mean, look at all of Cambodia. I mean, we never are discussing Cambodia in terms of, oh, they're getting tropical cyclone impacts. And that is not the case today. Cambodia is getting substantial tropical cyclone impacts. And, hold on a second. And they're already well within the cloud shield, the total convective cloud shield of Kalmaegi. And northeast corners of the country could get this core area of convection.
Weather Channel. Philippine officials said Thursday the death toll has risen to 114 from widespread flooding and devastation.
Yeah, that's Kalmaigi's impact in the Philippines that we're going to get to. But Cambodia right now, the northeast corner of the country in particular, lots of concern there. They're not used to tropical cyclone impacts whatsoever. Obviously, a lot of rural areas, a lot of low-lying flood-prone areas, and wherever this central core of thunderstorms and convection, wherever that goes, wherever that travels over is where you're going to see the highest risk of flooding rainfall. That's not exclusively limited to where this central dense overcast, which fortunately is relatively compact, but still very intense. The flooding threat is not confined to the central dense overcast of Kalmaegi, but it is where the greatest threat persists because of how heavy the rain is here in comparison to the rest of the storm. And again, northeast Cambodia, there's concern here, especially for places like Ban Lung and, Stung Trang and Siem Pang here. These areas are not used to tropical cyclone impacts, so once this central dense overcast here moves over these areas like it's about to, lots of rural areas and many low-lying basins in Cambodia, and lots of waterways too, right? Because this is full-on jungle down here in Southeast Asia, and there are a lot of different places that can flood. So not a good situation, and we've already seen Kalmaegi do terrible damage in terms of what happened in the Philippines. So let's look at what happened in the Philippines. Oh, wait, shoot. I didn't bookmark that. Let me bookmark that real quick so I can show you guys exactly what has happened. But yeah, the situation on Cebu Island in the Philippines, if you haven't seen already, is really, really dire. And while I can't show the damage videos and images here, they are pretty shocking. So they're on my feed at BackPerchCrow on X, and I encourage you to go look at that because it's crazy. So here was Kalmaegi's passage, the whole satellite loop, but really it's only the beginning part that we're interested in. So here is Kalmaegi's passage through the Philippines, and like I said, not a terribly well organized storm. I mean, he was pretty strong when he made his first landfall over the island of Leyte, right here. Category 2, pretty robust Category 2. He actually rapidly intensified by the official criteria of rapid intensification, actually rapidly intensified into a Category 2. Had he had more time before he made landfall, he would have been quite a scary intensity, so it was good. It was good that he had as little time as he did before making landfall in the Philippines, or else he really could have been a very powerful Cat 3, Cat 4 system. But it didn't matter. There's devastation anyway because the core of heaviest rain convection went directly over, so you can see Cebu City is highlighted here, and that long piece of land, that's Cebu Island, so that's where the worst flooding has occurred. Obviously, we had flooding elsewhere in the Philippines that claimed many lives, but the center of the disaster is Cebu City. And here, when I play this loop, you can see right there, especially at this moment, that huge burst just completely centered over Cebu Island, and that is where the heaviest rainfall accumulations occurred. And that's the whole passage. So even though this was a messy system, obviously making these multiple landfalls across the Philippines disorganized Kalmaegi further, weakened him down a category before he entered the South China Sea and started re-strengthening over open water again. It didn't matter. It wasn't the winds. It wasn't the winds that have proven to be the devastating factor. It again was the rain and the flooding and the water. It cannot be emphasized enough times that even though the wind and the strength and the intensity of typhoons like Kalmaegi, that's always what is emphasized. Ultimately, it's the rainfall that proves to be the most dangerous and most devastating effect time and time again. So let me clear this screen out randomly, okay. Because I want to show you guys what happened on Cebu Island. Real quick. Exactly the situation. Hold on a second here. So here's Cebu Island. This was the second landfall Kalmaegi made in the Philippines. So here is the high population centers, obviously a high population center here in Cebu City, but particularly Talisay City here is where some of the worst. So Talisay City is within the municipality of Cebu City, of the greater area here. But Talisay City is where some of the worst damage occurred, because here is the Mananga River. So the Mananga River flows through here. It originates over here. You can see it winding through these steep tropical mountains here on Cebu Island. So what happened here is that Kalmaegi's rainfall cascaded down these slopes. It was channeled into the Mananga River here, and then basically you had a huge flood wave come down this river all the way down and into Talisay City. And so now here's where you can see how the disaster unfolded, because look at how many homes we have along the Mananga River here, which obviously, as you can see, is usually not, in this satellite image at least, that is not a threatening flow at all. But because all of that torrential rain from Kalmaegi fell across the islands, this is a classic example. Of where the terrain played a major role. So the rain came down over these mountains, very steep cliffs, very steep rainforest cliffs here. They channeled all that water into the Mananga River at once. The river couldn't hold it, burst its banks, and here you can see how that became such a disaster, because the minute we're entering Talisay City here, look at how many homes are positioned right on the riverside. So all of these places, all of these structures, most of these that were within the vicinity of the Mananga River, I'm just going through it. Look how densely packed this whole area is along the river. And then again here. So this is how we got disaster, guys. This was from Kalmaegi's first set of landfalls in the Philippines. And you can see just how many buildings before it finally enters out into this channel right here. So particularly in Talisay City, Cebu City as a whole has been affected, but the homes right up against the Mananga River here, especially in this general area here in Talisay City, totally wiped out. All the structures right along the river have been totally obliterated by the floodwaters, and unfortunately the death toll has reached a staggering 140, with tragically another 127 people plus missing. So really bad news out of Cebu Island, and this actually makes Kalmaegi the deadliest tropical cyclone of 2025 to date. Deadlier than Hurricane Melissa, what she did in Jamaica. Not obviously to detract any of that, of how bad that damage was, but that is turning out to be a devastating death toll as well. But because of the fact that Melissa's most pronounced impact in Jamaica were her winds, as extreme as they were, flooding and the water is what kills the most, and that is proving that was the case again here these last couple of days in Talisay City, where a huge disaster has unfolded with over 140 people tragically losing their lives here as the Mananga River burst its banks from the extreme rainfall of Typhoon Kalmaegi in the Philippines. So back to here, this landfall again. We had this landfall a couple of hours ago, directly over the city of Queen Yan. And what are we looking forward here with Kalmaegi in terms of the future impacts for Southeast Asia here, this final landfall? And again, I'll just point to the freshwater flooding threat as the number one threat, but obviously the winds at the landfall point were very strong, and we're going to have to wait and see what footage and what damage pictures, because there's going to be some level of damage in Queen Yan, because even though they're probably a city that's pretty well built and obviously going to be just fine ultimately from Category 3 force winds, that's still significant, right? That's still pretty major. So you're going to see some level of damage, and I'm really interested to analyze just how bad it was. But just as we saw earlier, or last year anyway, with Typhoon Yagi, this is unlikely to be another Typhoon Yagi, right? Where you have the initial landfall Category 3 intensity, and then the remnants and the moisture of the system cause a big inland flooding disaster for other nations. In this case, it would be more like Thailand and Cambodia, whereas with Yagi, because she was further north, it was North Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar. In Kalmaegi's case, it would be Cambodia, South Central Vietnam, and then maybe even Thailand, where you could see the biggest flooding threat. But that's just going to have to be something we're going to wait and see. And hopefully Kalmaegi doesn't get any deadlier, because this is already a devastating system. And going back to that map of Cebu Island, again, you can see just how mountainous the island is, and how you kind of got this coalition of factors. Usually when you have a disaster that claims this many lives, usually it's a coalition of factors that comes into play. And in this case, it was the fact that you had this very jagged, steep mountainous terrain on Cebu Island, and then you have a big time and highly concentrated population center sitting right on top of a river that comes directly out of these mountains. And then you have a heavy rainstorm, a typhoon track directly over this island. That is basically the culmination of factors that brought us disaster. So obviously here our focus has been on Typhoon Kalmaegi, because that's the historic landfall, the first Category 3 plus storm to strike central Vietnam in 24 to 30 years. Whoops. How did I get muted? What on earth? That was strange. Wow. Yeah, sorry, Tony. Tony Long Island. Sound. Did that just happen? Please tell me that just happened. I don't even know how I got muted. I didn't remember even pressing that button. I don't know why I would press that button. Gosh. Alright, well, hopefully that wasn't too long. Okay. My crew's telling me it was brief. Alright. Alright. We're still okay. We're still going here. Okay. So, Tropical Storm Fung-wong here was just named. Not a tightly consolidated system yet. Still weak, 45 mile per hour winds, 992 millibar pressure. Kind of big and sprawling, as you can see. Very nice banding features, though. And maybe some more convective activity increasing near the center. But this is a storm we're really going to be tracking very closely and keeping our eye on, because she has the chance to be a November monster for the Philippines. Most models are indicating that Fung-wong will have a favorable environment for rapid intensification and could become a Category 4, maybe Category 5 storm that hasn't... Oh, I see. Okay, I see. I see what happened. Now I know how I got muted, guys. All right. No worries. Anyway, so Fung-wong, the models are indicating that Fung-wong has a chance to rapidly intensify into a large and intense Category 4, maybe a Category 5 system. That's in the cards. Not going to say that yet, but that's in the cards on the higher end of the spectrum because the environment is favorable for that level of intensification. And she is anticipated to make landfall directly into Luzon. Oh, wait, no, that's not it. Sorry. Luzon here. So here is the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's forecast cone for Fung-wong. And as you can see, they're showing robust intensification and then a landfall directly into the island of Luzon. Kind of ominously close to Manila, but not expecting a direct course strike there yet. But, of course, we're so far out that there's so much. I mean, you can see how, the variables, the amount of different solutions we have here. There's a very wide margin of error here for Fung-wong, and she could make landfall as far south as like Legazpi and Catanduanes Island, for example, or she could veer north and maybe make landfall where we kind of saw Typhoon Regasa make landfall earlier this year, over the Babayan Islands, maybe north of Luzon. So we do not know exactly where Fung-wong is going to make landfall in the Philippines, only that it is likely that she's going to, and at this current time, Luzon is under the gun, in the crosshairs, for what could be a Category 4 plus typhoon landfall. So, Fung-wong, definitely a storm we're going to be watching very closely. And one that we'll certainly be covering live because she has some major potential to get very strong and cause some big problems for the northern Philippines, while the southern side of the Philippines not expecting Fung-wong to make landfall where Kalmaegi did. But Kalmaegi's already left this kind of this southern islands of the archipelago, specifically Cebu Island, as we were talking about, in ruin and in kind of reeling from these very, very deadly flash floods along the Mananga River. So, not a good situation for the Philippines, even though, of course, there is no other nation on Earth that is more used to these typhoon landfalls. They're hit with more tropical cyclones than any other country in the world. But it's still terrible to see kind of these back-to-back hits where we've already had Kalmaegi prove to be devastating and Fung-wong too if she becomes a Category 4. Her winds alone, depending on exactly where she makes landfall, if it's a population center, if it's really rural, that will dictate heavily on how bad the impacts are. But Fung-wong, of course, with the environment as favorable as it is, and with models indicating that she could be a fairly large typhoon compared to Kalmaegi, who has been a very small typhoon during his lifetime, that is always concerning and always has the potential to be devastating. So we're keeping our eye on that. So we switch back to Kalmaegi here as he now continues to move inland in south-central Vietnam after making a direct landfall over Queen Yan. Mitchaboy commenting the The Japan Meteorological Agency has upgraded Fung-wong to a severe tropical storm. So yeah, and we're definitely seeing that sort of intensification here for Fung-wong, where these early stages of organization that we look for, again, loose sprawling system with not a lot of convection at the very core. There's a big dry area there. But we are seeing these very cold cloud tops, right? You can see right there, negative 123 Fahrenheit. So very, very, very cold cloud tops sprouting up, right? These thunderstorms kind of overshooting around the vicinity of what will eventually be the core, the well-defined core of Fung-wong. So definitely thunderstorm activity 100% increasing in association with sunset here in the West Pacific. It's now nighttime over here. And obviously you can see down here This island here. What is this island? Exactly? What island are we looking at? Is that Palau? Or no, Palau's down here. So what's... Oh, that's Yap. Okay, that's Yap. So here's the island. So the island of Yap is actually already being affected by Tropical Storm Fung-wong here, with these heavy thunderstorms, these kind of darker maroon colors, these intense overshooting convective cloud tops now moving over the island of Yap right here. So they're getting heavy rain and potentially tropical storm force winds from Fung-wong. And those early stages of kind of not really as much as intensification, just as much as basic cyclonic organization, right? Just the system kind of wrapping herself in, consolidating, getting her early nascent core kind of situated and organized. We're definitely seeing trends in that direction for a potential future bout of rapid intensification. And all of this is slated to take place over the weekend and into early next week. That's when we're expecting Fung-wong to make landfall. Roughly 3 days from now, almost 3 days exactly there, as you can see on the landfall countdown up in the top corner there. So we are definitely going to be live for that, and we're going to continuously be covering that live on our X feed at Back Perch Crew, because that is a very concerning situation. But now back to what we're tracking here with Kalmaegi. If you're just joining us, we went live actually just after Kalmaigi's landfall. Oh, here we go. Geometry Bloxia with a comment. Some infamous Pacific typhoons occur in November, such as Haiyan. Oh yeah, November, the Atlantic hurricane season, for reference, doesn't end until the end of November. So November is within the bounds of the hurricane season in the Atlantic basin, but things pretty much quiet down in the Atlantic. The only time you can get notable November activity is way down south in the Caribbean. And this year, obviously, a big question, I'm sure, for many people after Melissa is, are we going to see anything else in the Caribbean Sea? Please no. Fortunately, the global tropical weather hazards outlook is not showing any tropical activity whatsoever in the Atlantic for the rest of November. So maybe, fingers crossed, Melissa was the terrible grand finale of the very weird 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, where we had, 5 hurricanes, but 4 of them were, or I guess 6 hurricanes, and then 4 of them were Category 4 plus, and 3 of them were Category 5s, which is really, really strange. Really bizarre ratio there of hurricanes to, forget major hurricanes, Category 5. And even the one that didn't become a Category 5, Gabrielle, she was a mid-range Category 4. So a very strong and impressive system herself, but a very weird hurricane season overall. But I think we might be done. Thank goodness. Melissa looks to be maybe it for the Atlantic hurricane season. Mitchell Boy coming, yeah, November is notorious for producing some of the most destructive typhoons. Yes. And so we just saw Kalmaegi make landfall down south here in Leyte and then Cebu Island, and obviously causing the devastating flooding there. And just as Mitchell Boy and Geometry Bloxia are saying, and they are correct in what they're saying, November is very hot for the West Pacific when it comes to typhoon activity. In the Philippines especially, the window of dangerous landfalls is really as open as ever, especially in early November. So unlike the Atlantic, it does not calm down in the West Pacific as quickly at all. And a perfect point to illustrate that is, and this is why I have this image here, tomorrow is the anniversary of the 12th year anniversary of Super Typhoon Haiyan, which of course is the deadliest and most... Yes, it does have to do a lot with the tropopause. Geometry blocks you. You are correct there. But tomorrow, to perfectly illustrate this point, is the 12th anniversary of Super Typhoon Haiyan reaching her peak intensity, or known as Yolanda in the Philippines. Super Typhoon Haiyan Yolanda, reaching peak intensity just before landfall in the Philippines in almost the exact same area that Kalmaegi came in, except Haiyan came in as one of the most powerful typhoons of all time. And as you can see by this infamous satellite image here of Haiyan Yolanda at peak intensity, this was the pinnacle tropical cyclone. Really, it's almost impossible to get a satellite presentation more extreme than this. A storm that was almost certainly underestimated. And there were a lot of comparisons, and I made some of them myself, and I'll show you that here. There are a lot of comparisons made between Melissa's satellite presentation, because it was the most powerful satellite presentation ever for the Atlantic, right? If you just go by satellite estimation, no other Atlantic hurricane produced a satellite presentation that Melissa did. And it was so extreme that it actually began to resemble almost a little bit Super Typhoon Haiyan. So here was Melissa on this particular band of infrared imagery, which is representing water vapor. And so this was Hurricane Melissa, not even at peak intensity. This wasn't even at peak intensity. This was the night before peak intensity. She would actually get stronger than this. Although you can argue that this was kind of the peak of the satellite presentation, even though the hurricane hunters found that it was not the peak pressure and the peak winds. Nevertheless, look at Melissa here with this perfectly symmetrical, almost annular, not an annular hurricane, but a non-annular tropical cyclone. So annular tropical cyclones, if you don't know, are a specific type of storm where instead of that typical spiral rain banding pattern that you see in tropical cyclones, they're more symmetrical because they're kind of just an intense eye surrounded by really a single central dense overcast, kind of the donut or the truck tire shaped storms, just kind of a single thick rain band encompassing a symmetrical eye, which is why annular hurricanes are oftentimes the most symmetrical, because you can kind of flip them over and there's no extracurricular rain banding going on to ruin that symmetry, so you can kind of mirror them over on all sides, at least in the CDO part of the core, or the core of the storm, and they're more symmetrical than anything else. And Melissa had that. You know, she had that more so than any other Atlantic hurricane really ever that we know of. And you can see that here. Now, obviously, Haiyan 100% is still the more intense storm. And we did get that comment. We did get that question, is that, do you think Melissa was stronger wind-wise? And no, because Haiyan's 195 mile per hour estimate is almost certainly an underestimate. I think everyone would conclude that Haiyan was more like 200, 205 miles per hour minimum in terms of peak sustained winds, whereas Melissa officially 185 miles per hour. Again, I think there's plenty of evidence. We'll see what the National Hurricane Center does in postseason analysis to upgrade her to 190, maybe 195. I don't know, but 190, I think there's a good chance of that. But even if Melissa's upgraded to 190 miles per hour, that's still not quite to Haiyan's 195, and that too is also an underestimate. So Melissa became as close to Haiyan as you'll ever see, honestly, an Atlantic hurricane come. But Haiyan is still the queen. Haiyan is still really an unbeatable storm in terms of satellite presentation, and unbeatable in terms of just absolutely terrifying. Because look at this. I mean, there's just it doesn't matter how many times you look at it, it just is so hard to believe that a tropical cyclone actually reached this level of perfection. Like, this is a black hole in Earth's atmosphere. And the satellite loop here shows you, again, this will be the 12th anniversary tomorrow, here is the landfall directly into the island of Leyte. And, of course, the worst damage from Haiyan, where the majority of fatalities occurred, was in Tacloban City, which is located right here, right on the northern quadrant of where Haiyan Yolanda came in. And so that onshore flow, because of the counterclockwise flow, that violent, probably 200 plus mile per hour eye wall went directly into, or at least 190 plus mile per hour eye wall, went directly into Tacloban City. And the storm surge was apocalyptic. It was unlike anything you'll ever see. You should go, if you haven't seen it, go look up the storm surge videos from Haiyan and Tacloban City. It is insane. It came in so fast and so violent, right? Most of the times when we even look at some of the more devastating tropical cyclone storm surge disasters, even then, when whether you have eyewitness reports or footage, the surge, even though it will become violent with all the wave action and stuff, it usually fills in pretty gradually, right? At least gradually in terms of, in an hour it went from 1 feet to 5 feet. That's rapid. But Haiyan was totally different, like a totally different monster. The storm surge came into Tacloban City like a literal tsunami, right? You know how a true tsunami comes in, hits shore, and just literally obliterates everything when it comes in because it's moving so fast and so violently. That's what Haiyan was for Tacloban City. You can see an extended microwave pass, the microwave imagery of Haiyan. And, of course, we'll be posting about this anniversary tomorrow, 12th year anniversary of Haiyan. And boom, right there, direct hit into Tacloban City. Just horrible to watch, even in retrospect. Here, of course, is just kind of a context example, one of the greatest edits probably ever made to really give you a sense of scale for how incredibly powerful Haiyan was. This was Hurricane Katrina, the worst surge disaster in the 21st century for the United States, right? She was a very powerful Category 5, 902 millibars, 175 miles per hour. Well, this is Typhoon Haiyan if she were to have happened in the Gulf. And there you go. You have your comparison to Katrina and Haiyan. And obviously you can see it's not close. I mean, the central dense overcast symmetry alone is just insane. Haiyan, bigger, more powerful, just completely dwarfs Katrina. So that is a great scale of context to just give you an idea of how much more powerful Haiyan was than really anything we've ever seen in the Atlantic. Again, Melissa, that's why I showed that example came really, really close. Much closer to Haiyan than Katrina in terms of intensity, but still, no storm beats Haiyan. And Geometry Bloxia commenting Haiyan was for sure below 885 millibars. Yeah, I believe it. And it's unfortunate that we didn't have reconnaissance intercept, obviously, in Haiyan to know the true strength of this apocalyptic monster, because satellite estimates aren't everything, and satellite presentations aren't everything, right? The ADT analysis for Hurricane Melissa was actually a massive overestimate, right? So if we had just gone purely by satellite data, Hurricane Melissa was showing up as an 870, I think that was the peak value for ADT for Hurricane Melissa, 871 millibars, which would be just 1 millibar off of Super Typhoon Tip for the most intense tropical cyclone in world history. But of course, when the hurricane hunters, when Recon sampled the eye of Hurricane Melissa, it was incredibly intense, yes, but it wasn't 871 millibars. And even when she finally went sub 900 millibar right at the last minute, it felt like she looked like she was sub 900 millibars forever. Recon didn't confirm that until the last minute, right before landfall in Jamaica. And when they did, it was still 892 millibars. nowhere close to what the ADT estimates for Melissa were. So satellite estimates aren't everything, right? And I only say that because some satellite estimates pegged Haiyan as like 858 millibars, some crazy values like that. So that is a grain of salt there, as insane as the satellite presentation was. Ultimately, we simply may never know, other than just to say that Haiyan was definitely stronger than the 195 mile per hour wind estimate and more intense than the 895 millibar pressure estimate. And like I was showing here with Haiyan made landfall. Here's Tacloban City. And Haiyan made landfall right there. Again, truly a worst case scenario, and you can see how that happened because the storm surge push into this the city, obviously sitting on the water, but of course this inlet-shaped bay, which just completely collected the water, completely funneled the storm surge. Even though the eye wall kind of went over land here for a second, it didn't matter. It was so violent that it just completely wiped areas of Tacloban City off the map. No exaggeration. And, of course, over 6,000 fatalities from Haiyan. A very tragic and sobering day for the Philippines. But right now we have Kalmaegi, and even though obviously he was nowhere near as catastrophic as Haiyan was in relatively similar areas of the southern parts of the Philippine archipelago, he has still been devastating, not from storm surge, not from the wind like we saw with Haiyan, but from the rainfall in Cebu Island. If you're just joining us, I was talking earlier about exactly what happened here. Go to my XFeed at Backperch Crew. There's tons and tons of damage photos from Cebu City and Cebu Island. If you haven't seen them, it's really terrible, really dark, kind of dystopian-looking images in certain areas, especially in Talisay City, which is kind of part of Cebu City, right? Kind of incorporated in the same population mass over here. And to retell exactly what happened, well, it was a perfect combination of factors that caused the disaster. 140 fatalities with another 127 plus still missing here on Cebu, mostly on Cebu Island. And so what happened was Kalmaegi's core, the heaviest rain, the central dense overcast, the coldest convection went directly over Cebu Island. It poured torrential rain down over these very steep, winding mountain slopes to Cebu City's west. And that all that rainwater was channeled, as you can see, these are very sharp and steep slopes. All of that was channeled into the Mananga River here. So you can kind of get a sense these are very tropical, very rainforest. But all that rainwater came down these slopes and was channeled into the Mananga River, which flows directly through Cebu City, but particularly Talisay City. And all of that rainwater in such a short amount of time, the river couldn't handle it. It burst its banks, and here is where the worst of the worst damage occurred. Here in Talisay City, where you have a bunch of these homes really cram-packed very tightly together, and they're sitting right on the Mananga River. And so when the floodwaters came across, burst out of these banks and violently swept through, a very powerful force of flooding, it took out many of these tightly packed and tightly clustered homes here right on the riverside. And it is just sobering to think about that, because you're scrolling down here, and again, here's where some of the worst damage occurred. And most of these little homes that are so tight together and packed right in the waterfront, and you've got so many people living here. This is really a worst case scenario for Cebu City, because the floodwaters just swept everything away, just destroyed all of these homes right on the waterfront. And that is how we have ended up with hundreds of fatalities. It's really some of the more horrifying situations you see with tropical cyclones, when you have these situations where the rivers overflow and they destroy the homes and just kind of scourge this massive path of destruction through these towns and cities, and it's so awful and so mortifying to think about because it's literally washing homes, debris, and probably bodies too. Literally washing bodies into the ocean here, or this this channel of ocean anyway. In the Philippines here, that is just so blood chilling to think about, honestly. To see how the rainwater flowed down into the river here, the river swole up and just came down these mountains and literally just carved a path of destruction, just took out everything near it, kind of just liquidating all of the homes and all of the structures in Talisay City that were too close to the floodwaters, and literally just sweeping that out into the ocean. So a heartbreaking situation Typhoon Kalmaegi has already caused here in the Philippines, and now he's making a second landfall he has made a second landfall central Vietnam, the strongest storm, the first Category 3 plus storm to hit this region of Vietnam in 24 to 30 years. Officially, the last typhoon to make landfall south of the city of Da Nang in Vietnam at a Category 3 plus intensity was Typhoon Zack in 1995. So that was 30 years ago. This is a very rare event that you do not see often. And unfortunately, Kalmaegi, already talking about the devastation in the Philippines, well, he made landfall directly over the largest city in this general area other than Da Nang, and that's Quy Nhon, and he made landfall right over the city. So I would expect that because this was a powerful Category 3 system, despite the kind of ragged satellite appearance, microwave imagery showed a very powerful eye wall underneath these relatively disorganized cloud tops. I would expect that most of Quy Nhon is without power. And, you know, let's look here if we have any sort of reports of that ongoing. To see, like, what's going on. But yeah, mostly it's the aftermath in the Philippines, guys. I mean, this is what Kalmaegi has already done. I know we're covering the Vietnam landfall here today, but what Kalmaegi's already done is terribly destructive. Looking to see if we have any news here out of Vietnam in the early going. So I'm not seeing much here yet. Looks like we have a video of powerful waves hitting Vietnam before the landfall. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to link this underneath the live stream on X. So if you're on YouTube and you want to see this video and you haven't already, go to my X feed at Backperch Crew. I'm linking, I'll link any damaged videos and pictures. I can't show them here on stream, so I'll link them below my live stream on X. So here we go. So I just linked that there beneath my live stream on X. So if you want to see that, you can just go to the live stream and look directly below in that thread. Large waves, not seeing much in the way of other footage, and that's to be expected here because landfall has only occurred a couple hours ago. Mitchaboy asking, you think Fung-wong is currently undergoing rapid intensification? It looks like it will be Cat 1 any moment now. So if you're just joining us here, Kalmaegi, Typhoon Kalmaegi is not the only storm we are tracking. Tropical Storm Fung-wong over here in the Philippine Sea looks to really be getting her act together here, and is poised to rapidly intensify, potentially into a Category 4 plus super or super typhoon, or maybe just a Category 4 typhoon, very strong typhoon, one way or the other. The models indicate that Fung-wong has a favorable environment for some really robust intensification before she makes landfall in the Philippines, potentially over Luzon. That's where most models have her making landfall. Still a lot of uncertainty this far out. Where does the question go? To answer Mitchaboy's question, do I think rapid intensification is beginning for Fung-wong now? I would say no. I wouldn't say rapid intensification in the traditional sense has started yet, because Fung-wong is still yet to really establish a well-defined and insulated core. So right now we're seeing a very incomplete structure with this tropical storm. She really doesn't even have the whole eastern half of her core almost really doesn't exist in terms of having good convective structure layered through the clouds. I mean, there's a huge dry slot here on the eastern side, whereas you have this colder convection on the western side. Yes, but that is only just now wrapping up, and also this is just now sprouting up as kind of thunderheads, these thunderstorms that are just now sprouting up, and they haven't really congealed yet. So no, I wouldn't say rapid intensification in the traditional sense has started. Rapid intensification cannot begin until you have a well-defined and well-insulated core already established. Sometimes that happens when a storm is a tropical storm, although usually it's when you're looking at really tiny, compact systems like Milton or Aaron, for example, hurricanes in the Atlantic, really small pinhole eye systems. So with a larger storm like Fung-wong, we usually wouldn't anticipate rapid intensification to begin until she was a high-end Category 1 or low-end Category 2, because that's when the core gets established enough that you can transition from a gradual intensification to a rapid intensification, because the eye wall is fully closed off and formed in the eye, and the whole heat engine can really start taking advantage of the warm heat energy below from the sea surface temperatures. Now, is the basic organization happening a little bit more rapidly, I guess you could say now, than it was earlier? Yes, because obviously in the last 3 hours or so, just the level and intensity of the convective activity has increased greatly as Fung-wong has head into sunset, into nighttime here in the West Pacific. So the organization process is definitely picking up. In the earlier frames, you can see convection was much more anemic, kind of much more of a loose spiral banding rather than an intense and concentrated area of thunderstorms at the center. And we still don't have that very prominently, but you're beginning to see the early stages of that, of where these thunderstorms are eventually going to congeal together and make a central dense overcast and really wrap around the eye and form the eye wall and get this system going. So long answer short, no, rapid intensification I don't think is beginning, and I don't think it's going to become a Category 1 typhoon imminently, but organization is definitely picking up, and the convective activity is 100% increasing. And there, if I zoom out there, pretty crazy image here with the dual storms And again, another burst of activity. We've had this a lot in the West Pacific. Earlier, we had Regasa and Neoguri form and kind of do their thing at the same time. So Kalmaegi is going to be done by the time we're talking about Fung-wong solely, right? When Fung-wong is beginning to rapidly intensify, which models show are likely. Here, for example, is the latest run of the HAFS-A hurricane model for Fung-wong, obviously showing a very concerning situation for northeast Luzon in particular. Again, don't pay much attention exactly to the landfall location because we're way too far out to tell exactly where Fung-wong is going to make landfall. But obviously, this is what we're worried about. This is 922 millibar pressure, Category 4 force winds. So this would be a very powerful storm that, from wind speed alone, from the winds alone, would have the potential to be absolutely life-threatening. And here is the latest cone. Not really usually considered cone, but it's the latest forecast, at least, from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center for Fung-wong. Clearly showing that rapid intensification and that landfall probably in Luzon. How far does rapid intensification go and exactly where Fung-wong makes landfall, that is still definitely uncertain. So not going to speculate anything more on that. But definitely seeing that kind of wraparound occur. But until this convection fully encircles that nascent core of Fung-wong's, until the whole system is insulated and you have a solid eye wall on microwave imagery, we're not going to see the rapid intensification truly begin. Typhoon Kalmaegi weakening now as he moves inland. I'm going to unofficially lower his intensity here, because obviously he is not still at 125 miles per hour, because he's made landfall several hours ago and weakening has definitely been induced. You can see the system as it runs onto land and encounters the friction of terrestrial ground and has his fuel source, his food source of warm ocean water completely cut off. You can see that the system is really beginning to unravel. But despite the weakening of the winds, geometry blocks accompanying models were just crazy on the storm. Geometry blocks also commenting, so these comments are about Fung-wong. So to give context here, Geometry blocks commenting, it's only organizing at the moment, referencing Tropical Storm Fung-wong here. I reckon when the wind shear subsides, we will be talking about some serious stuff. Yes. And again, that's what the hurricane models, they're very enthusiastic about Fung-wong. Not as much maybe initially. A lot of them were showing Fung-wong going sub 900 millibars and kind of really nuking out the storm. So they've kind of backed off a little bit. They've become a little bit more realistic in terms of intensity, but this would still be a very dangerous Category 4 plus intensity for Luzon if it verifies. So the conditions are there. The ocean temperatures are definitely there. It'll just be a matter of when does the wind shear subside and when does Fung-wong get her act together and how quickly does she do that? Is she able to pull her kind of spiraling, sprawling self into a more concentrated area of vorticity and spin? That's what will determine exactly how strong she becomes. Going back to Kalmaegi here, despite the weakening of the winds, that's to be expected. The flooding threat, which has already been the defining characteristic for Kalmaegi in the Philippines earlier, with the 140 plus fatalities, likely will be over 200, tragically over 200 fatalities probably from the extreme and destructive flooding in Cebu Island of the Philippines after the Mananga River burst its banks and swept through Talisay City. Extreme destruction there. You can see all those damage images and videos on my X feed at Backperch Crew. But now Kalmaegi is again bringing the risk for life-threatening flash flooding, particularly in areas that are not used to seeing this level of rainfall from a tropical cyclone in a short amount of time. Of course, I'm talking about Cambodia here, northeast Cambodia. Not very often we're talking about Cambodia in the context of typhoons. This is a very southerly system, the first one to make landfall at this intensity this far south in Vietnam in 30 years. And obviously you have the flood threat in Vietnam, but in northeast Cambodia too, in extreme southern Laos, the southernmost portions of Laos, and then also maybe eastern Thailand down the road later today. Inland here, there are a lot of areas here in Southeast Asia where you have rural communities. Many of them are situated on waterways, and they don't have much experience with tropical cyclones, again, just because of the infrequency of ones this powerful making landfall this far south. Got another comment about Fung-wong, so I'll switch over to that. Mitch Boy, who I believe said is in the Philippines, watching from the Philippines. So he is certainly watching this closely, I would imagine. Comments, also if Fung-wong undergoes an eyewall replacement cycle, will this scarily increase its wind field? It's already 1.4 thousand kilometers in terms of diameter, I think. However, a thing about a tip referring to the largest and most powerful tropical cyclone in world history. That was back in 1979. Tip is still 800 kilometers larger. Wow. So Fung-wong, will she undergo an eyewall replacement cycle and become larger? That is hard to determine ahead of time, because I feel like there might not be time for... Remember, her landfall is scheduled basically for Sunday into Monday. So I'm not sure there would be enough time for Fung-wong to rapidly intensify, undergo an eyewall replacement cycle, and then complete that replacement cycle, or come close to completing it, to expand her wind field all before making landfall in the Philippines. I just don't think there's enough time for that to occur. Now, maybe she does rapidly intensify if she is ahead of schedule and she rapidly intensifies, and then she starts to go through an eyewall replacement cycle, then yes, that's possible. But her winds will also weaken, so that there's a lot of variance there to say whether or not that would be better or worse, right? Is it better because the winds are not as strong as they would have been if she doesn't do an eyewall replacement cycle right before landfall, potentially in Luzon, or is it worse because the winds are weaker, but she's also a larger storm? That's really hard to tell. I mean, more people across the Philippines may be affected. Maybe you'd see a bigger surge in certain areas. I don't know, though. We're just going to have to watch for that in real time. Eyewall replacement cycles are really impossible to forecast ahead of time, especially at this length. Other than that, they're inevitable unless you have a crazy Hurricane Melissa scenario. Other than that, they're more or less inevitable with powerful storms. But no eyewall replacement cycle needed. Fung-wong is already a very large system, and she has the potential to retain that kind of large and imposing size as she rapidly intensifies, even though she definitely needs to actually contract in size at the core, right? To tighten the eye wall and to really kind of tighten up that whole convective envelope, because right now it's very messy and loose and disorganized. Mitch Boy commenting, I remember I saw a model showing Fung-wong having concentric eye walls. I think that's what it's called. It's scary to... Oh, yeah, wait. I know what you're talking about, Mitchell Boy. I saw that one, too. That was one of the solutions people were passing around. That was a crazy simulated infrared satellite image because it showed a sub 900 millibar pressure, basically up to landfall in Luzon, but also with the very pronounced concentric eye wall look of a storm just about to undergo an eye wall replacement cycle. So again, we'll have to see if that shapes out. Models aren't as enthusiastic about Fung-wong as they were. They're not showing her going sub 900 millibars as much. I don't think that's 100% out of the equation, but it doesn't seem to be the most likely solution anymore. But again, we'll keep watching. We are definitely going to be watching every step of the storm because she has the potential to be a devastating system after the Philippines is still reeling right now as we speak from the devastating impact Kalmaegi had on Cebu Island. Just a quick shout out to everyone tuning in. Thank you for watching and liking and sharing the stream. And thank you for commenting. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to ask them. We'll do our best to answer. As we follow this breaking news story here for the Philippines today, this kind of dual threat, or I guess dual ongoing systems here, because we have Tropical Storm Fung-wong, who is anticipated to rapidly intensify before slamming into the northern Philippines, as the southern Philippines continues to reel from the devastating flash flooding in Cebu Island, mostly in Cebu City and Talisay City, which is a city kind of incorporated in Cebu City. From this storm over here, not from Fung-wong, she's still gearing up, man, and she is really just very large. That is a very scary sight. But from Typhoon Kalmaegi, because he already passed through the southern Philippines. He now is moving inland in Southeast Asia, made a near historic landfall in central Vietnam, is the strongest storm to strike that region in 30 years. And he already left a devastating path of destruction on the southern side of the Philippines. And now you have Fung-wong coming in. She has the potential to be a devastating storm for the northern Philippines. Hopefully not. The Philippines, of course, has more experience than anyone with tropical cyclones, especially strong ones. So hopefully they'll be ready for the wind. There are some places in the Philippines that are so good at dealing with storms like this that they'll just kind of go through a category. Not that it wouldn't be a big deal, not that it's not a big deal, but there are many areas in the Philippines that can take even a high-end Category 4 landfall really well, if they're not in a surge vulnerable location. Obviously, if you're in a landslide, flooding, or surge vulnerable location, that completely changes the game. Yeah, dangerous situation and a dual threat here. Really crazy image because we have Kalmaegi pulling away from the 140 fatalities he caused in the Philippines. It's going to be more than that. 127 plus people still missing. Now moving inland in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. And now you have Fung-wong literally just days later already coming in and trying to organize pretty promptly here out in the Philippine Sea. And once she tightens that core and once that wind shear lessens, we're expecting some pretty scary intensification that will be possible here. This half-say model run from tropicaltidbits.com showing a very powerful and intense Fung-wong making landfall in northeast Luzon. 84 hours from now. I guess that delineates landfall at 926 millibars. That would be 84 hours from now, Sunday, November 9th. And here's a forecast for Fung-wong. That's the sort of time frame we're looking at with this large and potentially extremely powerful system. But a really crazy satellite image here today in the Western Pacific. And none of it is very good. None of it is good news. See if we have any more reports of what's going on the ground here as we switch back to Typhoon Kalmaegi in Vietnam. Let's see if we have any other reports. Tons of images and videos continue to pour out of Cebu City. Another one of the crazy things that happened from Kalmaegi's flooding in Cebu City was at one point a lot of videos that showed these giant shipping containers were flowing down the river, flowing down the floodwaters there. And that's kind of a testament to how extreme and how powerful they were. You got giant shipping containers. Vehicles also were flowing down the Mananga River here as it ripped through Talisay City and kind of wiped out a lot of these small and tightly packed homes here along the Mananga River as Kalmaegi's rainfall over the mountains to the city's west channeled down these steep slopes into this river and wiped out big portions of a narrow portion of Talisay City, yes, but one that has a portion that has proved to be devastating because there's so many homes packed so tightly around this river, and it just overflowed and took everything with it, everything that was close to it, and swept it out into the ocean. As you can see here is where the Mananga River empties into the Pacific. So really heartbreaking news today out of the Philippines. As a real quick on another subject, on a different storm, it is not just the aftermath of Kalmaegi in Cebu Island, which is the deadly, right, Kalmaegi, what Kalmaegi has done on Cebu Island. I'm not sure, a lot of news, mainstream news at least, has picked up on this. They're actually making this storm the deadliest already. It's only just now making landfall in Vietnam. Already, Kalmaegi is the deadliest tropical cyclone of 2025 for what he's done in Cebu Island. And that is not the only aftermath. That is not the only catastrophic aftermath we are tracking. So we are still looking at the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica. This is in the Atlantic. And we have had a lot of satellite imagery come in for some of the most impacted areas. So to recap on that, Hurricane Melissa made landfall. There was a satellite loop of her making landfall in Jamaica. 185 mile per hour winds and 892 millibar peak intensity. At that time, also 252 mile per hour wind gusts were recorded by Hurricane Hunter dropsondes just as she made landfall. Melissa was the most tied the 1935 Labor Day hurricane as the most intense Atlantic hurricane landfall by pressure, and then also tied the 1935 Labor Day hurricane and Hurricane Dorian as the strongest landfalling hurricane at 185 miles per hour. At 185 miles per hour. Landfall occurred near New Hope, Jamaica, kind of equally over St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland parishes there. And the damage images from satellite that we're getting out are really, really horrifying, and unfortunately exactly what you would expect from a 185 mile per hour landfall. So if we go here where the eye wall of Melissa, if we go here where the eye wall of, wait, I don't have labels. Where are my labels? Okay, up here. That was too far to the south. So here is Black River in Jamaica, where the eastern eye wall of Melissa made a direct hit. And just look at how extreme the damage is, guys. Look at this. Look at all the roofs torn off. The debris everywhere. This, whatever this building was, totally destroyed. This looks like it may have been a church. Roofs torn off everywhere. Look at the piles of debris. Just really an apocalyptic landscape here in Black River. So we continue to monitor the more news because there's still areas, even to this day, over a week later, that are still inaccessible. There you can see some tree damage, but look at just all these different homes and buildings that are destroyed. There's still remote areas in rural western Jamaica that have been so severely cut off that we don't know the exact extent of how bad the damage is. So I wanted to follow up on this because I know we had a lot of people watching during our live streams of Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica, and so here is what the aftermath looked like now that we know, now that we have satellite imagery. So many different homes destroyed. I mean, just look at all this. Roof after roof just completely ripped off. This is high-end Category 5. I mean, look at this, whatever this structure was. This is high-end Category 5 damage. There's a dump truck here you can see. Was photographed, but this is some grisly stuff. This home did fairly well. But yeah, you can see, especially with these so many buildings here, you can just you can literally look at their layout. You can see the walls, the rooms so clearly because the roofs were just peeled off. Like this right here. Catastrophic wind damage for all of these communities that experience the full force of the eye wall in Jamaica. And again, I mean, we could go on. Only have so much time, but yeah, we could scroll this forever and it wouldn't get less shocking. There are just so many different towns that were destroyed. I mean, look at these areas where it's just whatever these structures were, the roofs are gone, and it's almost like they're cleaned out. It's just like they're just walls and rooms. I mean, that's all that's remaining. There you can see here, I mean, this just looks blank, but this was all green at one point. You can see how extreme the winds were. All of these trees and all just this basic tropical vegetation is completely stripped. Completely destroyed. I believe here is now Crawford, Jamaica. Catastrophic damage here. My goodness. Just a war zone here for many of these areas in western Jamaica. You can see literally nothing was spared, except for only the most well-built homes here. A lot of them are made of concrete, as you can see, solid concrete, so that is good. But the roofs did not survive in many cases. So a lot of solid concrete structures, but a lot of them seem to be completely cleaned out apart from those concrete walls. And this is going to take years to recover from. So many fatalities recorded. Not as many as what Kalmaegi just did in the Philippines, which is why that's such a big deal, but really devastating damage everywhere you go. The vegetation loss, not just from the winds, but from the salt water being carried through the extreme winds is 185 mile per hour sustained winds, and all the salt water being deposited on the plants too. So any plants, any vegetation that survived the physical force of the winds was then dehydrated, burned, and killed off by all the salt water left over. That is a common thing we see with high and Category 5 landfalls on islands like Jamaica. We saw it earlier this year in the Pacific and the Philippines with Nando, Typhoon Regasa Nando over the Babayan Islands. You saw the browning of those islands too, just as we've seen in Jamaica, where all the vegetation is either stripped or burned and dehydrated. Even these areas were not spared, and we're going pretty far inland now. So it just shows you how far inland those extreme Category 5 winds penetrated. I mean, look at whatever this was. I mean, this looks like a castle. I don't know exactly what it was, but it looks like a castle. It didn't even survive. It's a very interesting looking building. Again, this is all, if you're just joining us, we are overviewing not just the aftermath, so we're watching the ongoing landfall of Typhoon Kalmaegi in Southeast Asia and Vietnam, the aftermath of Typhoon Kalmaigi's flooding in the southern Philippines, which has been catastrophic, but also the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa over 1 week ago in Jamaica. That's what we're looking at now, the extreme high-end Category 5 damage in rural western Jamaica at the location of landfall. Look at this tree. This was a massive tree, uprooted. You can see the root ball there. But post-apocalyptic looking destruction as far as the eye can see. And the vegetation is just the natural environment is just totally decimated too. You can see that. And that, look at that. I mean, that was just a tiny little slice of what it looks like here. I don't know if this lot was completely wiped out or not. I don't know if there was something there. Going to be very interesting what the National Hurricane Center has to say about Hurricane Melissa in post-season analysis. I do believe she had a chance at tying Hurricane Allen as the strongest Atlantic hurricane of all time. That would be 190 miles per hour, that sort of wind speed. Here you can see boats. A lot of boats overturned, tossed up, certainly by storm surge here. In western Jamaica, this boat has been completely turned over. More massive destruction. I don't know what that is. Something that was tossed up there like that. This is the worst of the worst when it comes to wind damage. Are these shipping containers? These might be shipping containers. Another massive tree downed here. You can see that really well. Roof after roof gone. Obviously, whatever this place is, they did their homework correctly in terms of architectural construction. But as you can see, it just goes on, and this is just a tiny, tiny little sample. I mean, look at how many different places were damaged so catastrophically by Melissa. And we're not even, I mean, now we're in Westmoreland up here. We haven't even touched this. I mean, look how many homes are here. A lot of them have lost their roofs. I mean, we can just... look at so many different areas. I mean, so look at this. This town right here. More devastation. It's just devastation as far as the eye can see. Just as we feared when we were watching it in real time. Again, Melissa was one of the most intense and the most intense landfalling Atlantic hurricane we've ever seen. So this, unfortunately, is not a surprise to see this kind of damage come from that. And we were just talking about earlier, and it's a good comparison to make right now, because here was Melissa. This was not even at peak intensity. This was shortly before peak intensity, but it really speaks to how intense she was, how powerful she was, presenting the most extreme satellite presentation ever in the Atlantic. A very Pacific typhoon-like structure here on the very high end. And when you compare her to Super Typhoon Haiyan, obviously one of the more powerful storms we've ever recorded in the modern era, you can see that even though Haiyan is clearly still the more intense storm, there are some scary similarities with how unbelievably symmetrical and intense these two storms were. And that's not a bad comparison to make right now, because tomorrow is the anniversary of Super Typhoon Haiyan, 12-year anniversary of Super Typhoon Haiyan, also known as Yolanda in the Philippines. Anniversary of her peak intensity and subsequent landfall over the island of Leyte in the Philippines, which is exactly where Kalmaegi made landfall earlier today. Right at sunset in Vietnam, local time, early morning before sunrise here in South Texas, where we're streaming from. And, but yeah, so right near the anniversary of Haiyan, Kalmaegi made landfall in the exact same location, obviously nowhere near as strong as Haiyan. Only a Category 2 at landfall in the Philippines, but it didn't matter because it wasn't the winds, it was the rainfall and the flooding that claimed so many lives on the island of Cebu. And now Kalmaegi making his 7th total landfall, because he made 6 across all the different islands of the Philippines. So he made 6 landfalls technically across the Philippine archipelago, and he's now making his 7th directly over the major city of Quy Nhon, Vietnam, becoming the strongest storm to strike this region of Vietnam, this central Vietnam region south of the city of Da Nang. Typhoons, strong ones, do not hit down here very often. In fact, strong typhoons don't make landfall in Vietnam very often, period. And but Kalmaegi in particular, in this region, this far south, he is the strongest storm here in this general vicinity since Typhoon Zack 30 years ago in 1995. So a very rare situation that is ongoing, and a very dangerous one, especially for the flooding, because we could still see that occur inland, not just in Vietnam, but also in Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. Okay, so we do have a new video here, but it's still hours before. So we're only just now getting... We're only just now getting some of the footage that occurred hours before Kalmaegi made landfall in Vietnam. So it's probably going to be several more hours until we get footage of what landfall looked like, because it was a pretty powerful landfall. But here we go. So more footage that I'm going to link. Under my X live stream. So if you want to see it, go there. So I'm linking that under my X live stream. Showing how strong the winds were even hours preceding Kalmaegi's landfall. So that really tells you how strong they would have been in the eye wall of the storm. Kalmaegi, after going through the Philippines, did reach... Let's see if I have that here. Did reach a Category 4 peak intensity over the South China Sea before weakening just a bit down to Category 3 strength before making landfall in Vietnam. So here was Kalmaegi earlier. Well, so this was last night. This was Kalmaegi last night, nearest peak intensity. You can see the eye never fully cleared out, but was relatively more well-defined. But here's the important image I want to show you. This was at peak intensity, and that is a very powerful eye wall signature there on microwave imagery. So even though Kalmaegi did weaken a bit, and even though his satellite presentation is not the most impressive that you've ever seen, even for a Cat 3-4, that sort of under the hood microwave view of a very pronounced, a very well-defined and very strong eye wall indicates that this was probably a very big deal for Queen Yan in terms of how strong the conditions were there. So I'd expect that a lot of the city, if not most of the city, because the landfall was so direct, the eye wall boom boom going over on both sides of Queen Yan here was pretty severe. So maybe a lot, if not most of the city is now without power. Now, Kalmaegi, fortunately for the rain, in terms of talking about rainfall flooding, Kalmaegi is moving quickly, so he's not going to be sitting anywhere, moving very slowly, dumping a lot of rain. So that is good news, but there are still so many places here in the rainforests and the jungles of Southeast Asia, so many rural communities that are in low-lying flood-prone areas that are living along these waterways and that don't have a ton of experience, unlike the Philippines, that don't have a ton of experience dealing with tropical cyclones. The Philippines have a lot of experience dealing with tropical cyclones, more than anyone else, and even they and Cebu Island have faced disaster due to the right combination. Basically, Kalmaegi, the core is a core of heaviest rain going over the right place or the wrong place at the wrong time, I guess. Right place for the flooding to occur. The heaviest rain tracking directly over these very jagged inland mountains in Cebu Island. You can see just how jagged they are. Then flowing into the Menanga River, which then swept through Talisay City and destroyed all of the tightly packed homes that were on the riverside, and swept a massive amount of hazardous debris and all this sorts of junk and stuff into the ocean, and probably bodies, unfortunately, as well, because the fatality total is so high, and there's still over 100 people missing. So this is a really quite a disastrous situation, and it's pretty sobering to see the fact that we've got this going on here, Kalmaegi's aftermath here on Cebu Island, and then we have the death toll still is going up in Jamaica from Hurricane Melissa, and that was almost all wind related. That wasn't even flooding related. And then if it couldn't get any worse, right? So we've got those two aftermaths that we're looking at, these areas that have been devastated, Jamaica and the southern Philippines. And if it couldn't get any worse, we still have to watch another storm over the next couple of days. Tropical Storm Fung-wong, who is still a weak system, 45 miles per hour and 992 millibars, but a system, nevertheless, that is getting stronger, and or at least in the moment getting more organized in preparation to get stronger, because the conditions look favorable for rapid intensification. And this is such a menacing storm because look at her size already. Okay, so while this size, at least at the core area, is not optimal for intensification, she has an incomplete core structure that's kind of sprawling. What you want to, or what a tropical cyclone wants for intensification, for robust strengthening, is a tighter, more robust core. Fung-wong does not have that right now, but she is on her way to achieving that, and that's probably what we're going to see over the next 24 hours, as opposed to rapid intensification or something like that. We're probably going to see this more incremental sort of organization where she's setting herself up for eventual rapid intensification because the environment favors that. And where she'll be going? Well, she's aiming towards land, the northern Philippines to be exact. We don't know where exactly, but Luzon right now is seemed to consistently be where most models are pegging a potential landfall. And how strong could she be by that potential landfall? Well, the latest half-say model run, and we're going to have to continue watching not just this model, but all the others where they're trending, shows a very powerful and large typhoon, large being the key, right? Larger systems are always worse. A very powerful and large typhoon, potentially of Category 4 plus strength, pressures in the 920s, making landfall in Luzon near or just after peak intensity. So a very concerning situation and very unfortunate, because we over the last 10 days, 8 days, 9 days barely, we have had a whole host. We've now had two tropical cyclone induced disasters, one in Jamaica, one on the island of Jamaica, and one on the island of Cebu in the Philippines. One from wind, that was Melissa in Jamaica, and then the other from flooding, that's Kalmaegi in Cebu. But Fung-wong is now going to make that potentially, if these forecasts verify, the third potential island-based tropical disaster within the last 10 days. So this is just a really unfortunate turn of events here, that we're having all these different systems tracking here. And this image says it all here in the West Pacific alone, because you've got Kalmaegi here, and you've got Fung-wong here, and they're simultaneously spinning. Now today, Fung-wong was only recently named earlier, right before Kalmaegi made landfall in Vietnam, which took place a few hours ago. So, just a flurry of bad news. Just to throw this in there, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, I do have that update now. So, Kalmaegi, the latest Joint Typhoon Warning Center update for Kalmaegi is that, I guessed right, 115 miles per hour, 960 millibars exactly. So I initially put that up there as my own unofficial estimate, and now that is the official new update from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center for Kalmaegi strength. So weakening, still a Category 3 as of the last 2 hours, probably almost certainly a Category 2 now, but nevertheless, going by the official update, I did estimate that within the margins. And an interesting update now on Fung-wong. The new pressure for Tropical Storm Fung-wong has actually gone up. So the core pressure is actually weakened now to 995 millibars. But that is relatively marginal, and the structural convective changes that we're seeing right now are towards a direction of further organization and eventual intensification. So even though the latest update just came in, 995 millibars, that technically weakens Fung-wong a little bit from the last JTWC advisory. I wouldn't put much stock into it because we're still in those early stages. That's a very marginal difference of pressure. There is no rapid intensification happening right now, for sure. We're still in the early organization phase. But I'm not surprised. You don't be surprised, at least, to see a little bit continued fluctuation of Tropical Storm Fung-wong probably over the next 24 hours as she continues to get her act together, because right now she still doesn't even have a complete core. You can see the other half of her center is missing. But certainly something we're going to be watching, because the models are very bullish on this storm, and she could be a major system for the northern Philippines, and that's of course not what we want to see, especially not after there's this entire disaster that has occurred in Cebu City from Kalmaegi's first landfall, and now he's made landfall in Vietnam, and we'll have to see what happens there in the coming hours. But we hate to see Fung-wong coming in to the Philippines like this when Cebu Island has faced such a tragic disaster, and much of the city along that river, the Mananga River that comes through there, has been absolutely decimated. So really, really, really tragic stuff, unfortunately, guys, and a lot more to watch here in the coming days. 3 days approximately is when Fung-wong is going to make landfall, as you can see there, landfall counter. And we are going to be covering every second of that, as well as the ongoing aftermath from Kalmaegi in both the Philippines and Vietnam, as well as Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica. That is still an ongoing and active breaking news situation. For now, that is going to wrap up our live stream today. Thank you for everyone tuning in on both X and YouTube. Follow us on X at Backperch Crew. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Backperch Weather Live, for more live streams like this and more live coverage. We are going to continue watching Tropical Storm Fung-wong. And that will be our next live stream, almost certainly, as Fung-wong starts to probably rapidly intensify here soon as we get into the weekend. So that is when we're going to be going live next. Thank you for everyone for commenting, asking questions, liking the stream, of course, and sharing the stream. And above all, thank you for watching. And we will see you again soon.